Good afternoon and welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg, Evagnoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World Collective Energy Share. So, what I had going on yesterday sort of passed. You said you had some random anxiety. I don't even know where to start this week.
Yeah, it was Saturday night during the night, I think. Just, silly stuff that just kept coming up, and I'd be like, "What? I don't understand that." And it was while I was trying to sleep, and I would go back to sleep, and it would wake me up again, and I was like, I just don't understand this, And I keep saying I've dealt with it, and then I'm like, but it wouldn't be coming up if I dealt with it, and so is it just? I don't know, it just seemed like a symptom of something bigger. Obviously not the specifics.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was the same thing that happened to me yesterday when I texted you because it was so random. It came out of nowhere, right?
Mhm.
And I had this
Yeah,
huge, for me, it wasn't anxiety. It was just this anger and irritation, right? Because it was like this feeling of why can't I shake the feeling of this tether, right?
right.
And it was like, I don't know, I sort of went a little, I went a little, like I got into sort of a rant about family stuff, about expectations, about like all the things. And I was just like, wow. And like I could hear it coming out of my mouth because I was just sort of venting to my husband. And it was like, where is this even coming from? Because I'm totally aware of it's just a symptom of something else, right?
Right.
I'm like, well, why do I feel like this tether is still here? I feel like it's around my throat. I can't even breathe. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and I have no conscious connection and agreement to allowing it. So why would it still be there? Right? That was the whole like, and I sort of felt like myself, like I was sort of like thrashing energetically, and I was just like, wait a second. So like, what am I doing? It's just my choice. So
Right.
whatever. So so I just was like, you know what? I'm gonna let that flow. And I'm like, I spoke my mind. I vented a little bit. And then I was like, yeah, it's time to change this. I'm just done being it. Like, why does this even come up anymore? And I realized this morning in meditation that part of it is it's these are these things that are so deeply ingrained, right? That we've been talking about, right? Like we talked about last week, right? Such deeply ingrained that it's not that I'm tethered to it. It's that I'm in such a habit of reacting a certain way to it that I don't know how
Right.
to react differently.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I feel like we do so much on autopilot that there's no thought in it.
Right.
And it becomes an inauthenticity in and of itself.
Right, because then we go on autopilot and we just start
Right.
acting the way we've always acted, we're reacting the same way, and then we wonder, we get into sort of like this hole, right? And then we're like, well, how did I get in the hole? Well, you just walk down the same path into the same hole. Like, why, why,
Right.
why?
Right. Well, and I tie that back to for some reason it occurred to me this morning, in looking at where I am with my 3D world and saying, okay, it takes the same energy to create this versus this. And I say I want this, but I'm creating this. So why am I creating this instead of this? If it takes the same amount of energy, the same focus, the same, just focused in a different direction. And it's like, well, it's because this is habit and this is not habit. And then I just get angry because it's like, well, why do I keep doing that? Why do I keep falling for the same triggers? Why do I keep, it's like, okay, well, we release the karmic obligations and karmic debt and that it's all complete, but yet it hasn't taken away the behavior that was behind it.
Well, and the habit, right, the habitual behavior that we
Right.
use to autopilot, right? So it's like,
Well,
okay, now we've got to break the cruise control.
yeah. Well, and it's really interesting. This week I'm subbing in for a friend for memory care help for 2 hours a day. And it's so interesting to see how she lives, not just in the, not just in the now, but literally in the minute, and how unburdened she is, and how extremely happy she is, and how it's like it really upsets people. And I'm like, why? Because I see it as delightful.
Right. Right. Because there's nothing but the present.
Right. And it's, you know, she remembers, she still remembers how to bathe herself and eat and brush her teeth. And, she has to continually check her calendar, but she remembers to check her calendar. And her friends still take her to bridge, even though she doesn't know how to play bridge. But she's forgotten all the obsessive fiddling with stuff and my kid's name and then ask me every 5 minutes what they're doing. And it's like, to her, it's the first time she's heard it. And I mean, she is delightful to be around from the perspective of she doesn't have the burden of all this lifetime of stuff that she's carried forward with her. And it's like, I think I need some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a good experience for you to have, right?
It really is. It really is. And somebody was saying about how, one of her kids was saying about how, oh, I just dread having this conversation with her because she's just going to be so upset. And I'm like, for 5 minutes.
Or less, right?
Right. And it's like, you can say whatever you want to say because it just doesn't matter.
Well, and it is a goal for us to get there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it was like, literally every day is a new day for her.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, that's what I was looking at is, so how do I just do this differently? Like, how do I act differently in response to this situation? Right.
And something else is, it's like when you were saying that, I kept hearing to myself, how do I be different? And I think that if you can back it up to where you take the habits out of your being, then I think the doing will be different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
And that,
the habits have gotten all the way down to the being level.
well, yeah, because we're so like, and that's the thing is that's where we've gotten to is we're completely conscious of so many things going on, right? And observant. And yet we're still letting our habits catch up, right? So it takes
Mm-hmm.
a while of rehabilitation, which is
Right.
what we talk about so much about that conscious, being conscious about so many things to rehabituate ourselves, right? The way we talk to ourselves, the way we talk to each other, what we talk
Right.
about, the energy we hold, the energy we give certain things. And it was funny because when I finally decided, when I looked at it last night, then I was just like, you know what? Honestly, that's not right now. And it's not any concern of mine. And I don't have to react it anyway. And I chose to just
Right.
listen to an audiobook that I've been listening to. And I just totally forgot about it. Like you're talking about the woman that you're helping, right? So,
Yeah.
so I mean, and then it was funny because I literally just sort of decided to not be bothered by it, listen to my book. And I did that for a while. And then I was just like completely different and fine because I
Right.
wasn't holding on to it anymore.
Yeah. I wonder, if there's still molecules or pieces or parts that are still holding those habits in place, or if it's just a question of establishing something, a new habit. But I don't know,
That's
the
a
word
belief.
habit.
That's a belief that we, so there's a belief in there a lot of times that we have that if we take something away, we have to fill it with something else, right?
Right.
So part of what we've been talking about is just being, like being in this different place, being from a different place.
Right,
And
right,
maybe part of it is saying, I don't have to do anything,
right.
and
See,
then
and that,
the ego starts going, but then this person will be hurt, and then this will happen, and then this will start this, and then it's like, you know what? Not my circus, not my monkeys. I guess for us to just sort of
right.
stop
Well,
the.
and I keep coming back to everything's perfect in the moment for what it needs to accomplish in the moment, and everybody's agreed to where the circumstances that they are. So accept them as they are, stop judging them, and then move on.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because I was thinking about it because I was like, okay, families are where we tend to hold the most habits of how we act and react to people, right?
Right.
And so I was looking at that going, I think part of what is a challenge sometimes, or actually part of the rehabituation is this. My family, my inner core, family and friends, we all act in a certain way, right? There's a lot more authenticity. We're more focused on very different things than many others are focused on, right?
Right.
Even my kids and my husband, it's like we have this dynamic of honesty and trust and no drama. And we've just never had that. And I don't like, and those people who I foster around me now are those who really don't do drama. It just is,
Right.
right? So when I just feel this huge chasm between me and, like, say others, say in the family, or people or whatever, that are still wanting to, not only not wanting to, but are still immersed in drama and wanting to pull everybody in around them, right? And judging you for not being in the drama and everything,
Right.
and then second guessing your motivations because you're not, like, it's like this whole, like, like reasoning. And then I'm like, problem is, I'm like, well, why do we even need to care? I don't, because they can second guess. And in all honesty, what got to me for a moment when I had that thing last night was, I've always been like, in terms of my biological family, I've always been misunderstood. Always, 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 my entire life. Um, and part of it is because I act differently than everybody else in the
Hmm.
family, right? Because I don't prescribe to the same, and, like, kind of, I don't know if I don't want to say anything that sounds judgy. I don't prescribe to the same way of interacting that they do. It just isn't who I am. It's just a different makeup, right?
Right.
So what happens is the lack of response then causes people to then second guess your motivations, or why you say or don't say something, or, oh,
Right.
how, whatever. Anyway, and it was so weird that all of a sudden it just whirred up like this top in my head over some fairly minor stuff. But then I was just like, you know what? I can choose or not choose to allow it to tether me.
Right.
But it goes back to what we were talking about last week is, it's interesting. I realized, well, right this second, I just realized what that has to do with. That has to do with the true cat's playtime of day, so they're running in and out. Um, it's the true place of saying. So at Friday night we had energy share, and we were talking about, what was it we were talking about? The
God.
talking about,
At the share,
yeah, Friday night.
uh, letting go. We talked about,
Oh my God, I just had it, and it just like flew out of my head.
well, we talked about the karmic debt,
Oh,
letting,
letting go and letting, like, being okay with letting stuff fall away, right?
right. Right.
That's what we talked about, right? So, like, such a degree that it's just to be like, it's just like being okay with whatever falls away when we commit ourselves to being in that wholeness. and just
Right.
trusting to that anything that falls away is just not of that wholeness energy, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I just realized that that's part of it. Is it's it's sort of rearing its ugly head because it's a crumb in the folds, right, of a habit of that
Right.
kind of intention to say. So, because part of it is, well, you realize if you do this from this higher perspective and you stay in that being state, you are most likely going to dissolve those relationships.
Right. Right. Or at
And
least evolve them to where they're not the same relationship.
right. And some people, yeah, could get hurt, could feel hurt. That's their own stuff.
Right.
It's nothing you can do about it, right?
Right.
So the thing is for me to be able to say, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Just letting it go and acting
Right.
to that higher perspective. What a great to the ego.
Well, and I felt like after the share, things were much calmer
Yeah, me too.
and more peaceful. And I don't know if it's okay. So we went to another level, and now we have to skim off the next layer.
Yeah, or it's we got to let everything those habits to catch up, right? Or we really have
Right.
to go from, right?
And maybe
So
it's the depth of the habit that we're, skimming off.
yeah, because we're finally getting this stuff that's really deeply embedded as it pops up to the surface, right there at the on.
Well, and so much of it has to do with just the human condition. And I've been obsessed with the thoughts of returning to our natural state, which I don't consider being human our natural state.
Yeah, correct. Hmm.
And so in
Or
shedding,
what people define as human, right?
right, right, and shedding all that and seeing and allowing that level of authenticity to come out, there's got to be, we believe that there has to be some fallout, some consequence, some.
Right, because what was going on in my head is, well, if you do that, and you're thought of as a bad person for, staying with your authenticity, right?
Right,
Am I going
right,
to get for it? Am I going to be, like, am I going to be a bad person? I was like, oh, look at that. There's a judgment right there, you know?
right,
Mhm.
right. And, I don't know, for some reason I keep thinking back to certain times when even in our, spiritual family, things come up and judgments come up about how we've agreed to do this, to return to our wholeness, to fall into separation, remain in separation, and then evolve back into remembrance, and for some reason all that's been, it's almost been like threading pearls on a necklace for me, or beads or whatever. It's like it's all coming back together full circle to, we all agreed to this, and we're all following in this, and it's all perfect, and that there's no room for judgment.
Right.
And for some reason that's been on my mind lately, in remembering that level of authenticity.
Yep. Yeah, and it makes us uncomfortable because we're used to, and these are other folds, right? Because we don't realize, even when we get like 85% of the way there, we don't realize there's still crumbs in there that cause us to value ourselves based on how we're perceived by others, right?
Right.
So back to the bunny from last week and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, when we talked about it on the share Friday night, what was funny was the collective like gasp that everybody had.
Right. I know.
And we're like, go back and listen to the video. So go watch the video from this week.
I know. I know. And I did finally tell my husband, and he said, oh yeah, he said that happened to me last year, and he said I didn't sleep for a week. So yeah, that was a very, and I think I believe that each of us have chosen to go through a certain level of that.
Yeah. Can you be? Can you continue to be steadfast in
Right.
that of wholeness?
Can you
Like,
look at wholeness from that perspective?
right.
Right. Which, that still gives me kind of a shudder on the inside.
Yeah. A little, yeah, me too. A little twinge, right?
Yeah.
But
Like, yeah, I did it for a minute, and
so
I'm better.
yeah. I mean, I'm better too. This morning I did meditation on just allowing it all to align, being in that place of wholeness. I find that right now things are expanding so quickly and shifting so fast that it's almost like imperative that I have my daily meditation.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I have to have, even if it's just a few minutes, to almost like regain my remembering,
Yeah.
which I
Remember.
keep I keep I keep looking at that word remembering, and realizing that to me, it's not thoughts, it's remembering. So
Right.
rejoining that wholeness.
Right. Yes. And just coming back to that pillar of wholeness. Like that's all I keep on thinking is pillar of wholeness, pillar of wholeness, right?
Right, right.
Authenticity and power and remembrance and
And it's something that just came up is, and in that, not allowing those habits to keep creeping back in and trying to incorporate themselves into that level of wholeness, because it doesn't work.
right.
I can see it shifting, attempting to make it something that it's not.
Yeah.
Almost like it has a consciousness of its own.
Yep. Oh, yep. There's a yawn. Yeah, there's still something that needs to be untied, though. I can still feel that.
Yeah. I don't know if it's about habits that tie us to humanity, or belief ties to humanity.
Well, because what comes back to me was after I had my little rant last night,
Right.
then I went through this maybe 10 minutes. But the funny thing is, this comes and goes so fast now, which is really nice, right? When it hits, it hits. And I step back and go, whoa, let me just observe this. Last night I felt like I just needed a little rant to sort of help it along. And then I had about 15 minutes in there where I felt so alone. And
Yeah.
it's very rare for me to have like a feeling like that in a way that it feels sad. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. Instead of, oh, I'm alone. Yay.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Exactly, because usually I'm like, okay, great.
Yeah.
But it was
I'm
like it was like, and it was about a 15-minute period, and it was just weird because I was like, whoa, some like the bottom just dropped out of something, and I just feel like that and lonely, and like in a way of exclusion and confinement. And then I said, this is ridiculous. That's just a little tiny speck of perspective from the wholeness. Then I went back to that wholeness thing, and that's when I was like, you know what? I'm going to let this process on its own. I'm going to go listen to my book.
Yeah. Um, I'm I'm wondering if there's something to do with, like, we've over the last few weeks we've talked about, releasing, completing the karmic debt, releasing all that. Okay, so we've done that. What if, and I associate the karmic debt with, or karma with separation and humanity. What if what if there's a level above that?
Like,
I don't know. It's like a different level, of agreements, or a different level of karma, or a different level of um, letting go what we've agreed to do.
well, and it's almost like this feeling of loneliness is the deepest crumb of fear that we still have.
Right,
Loneliness is a place of exclusion, not solid solitude, which is a much different thing. That's part of the
oh,
whole, right?
right. So,
So,
okay, so if we've gotten to this place of releasing all this stuff, it would logically follow that we feel alone because fewer people are in this position of having released all that,
right.
completed all that karmic debt.
Yeah.
So,
And what hit me too, and this actually hit me earlier today, which is why it's sort of connecting some dots here, is, like seeing something we've talked about in the past, how people get into the pattern and habit and almost like a compulsion sometimes to continue on the spiritual path, to continually take classes and different practices and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes, well, and I was like, well, maybe it has to do a large part with feeling like they need to be a part of a group,
right,
right? Because they feel so solitary in their own journey, right? So it's like,
right,
okay, and so if you're part of a group, that the focus is that it's all your own journey, right? So that it's like, yeah, we support each other, but it's all up to you. Sometimes people aren't ready for that solitary power, right? And so they'd rather do something that's much more community group oriented. And the thing is, bringing everybody together to still say it's our individual journeys, but we're all going through the same journey because we're all the same, right?
right. What if it's a question of, how can I put this into words? Okay, so we agree upon separation, we fall into the density of separation, and we then have to reestablish community, or companionship, or togetherness within separation. And it's like, if we're backing out of that, then we have to take the ultimate step of leaving that separation and do the actual connection back to wholeness. And maybe the that this new level of aloneness is that step prior to stepping back into that full wholeness.
I know what you're trying to say. It's really hard to put into words.
It really, I mean, it. I guess essentially, if you just want to put it, you know, plain English, is it's completing the separation.
Laurel's on, and she says, "Lol, I'm catching a connection on the plane of soon to land."
Oh, how funny!
Yeah, it is, and it is a transition. That's what it feels like. It's this transition because it's such a deeply embedded habit of one set of beliefs to another.
Right,
Well, actually,
right.
no, sorry. It's a set of beliefs into a state of being that's free of beliefs,
Yes,
which is a completely different paradigm. And that's something we're just unused to.
it's a whole different basis.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
And so
Yep.
And so it's funny because that's been, yeah, that would explain a lot because it's stuff that I've been looking at, like in doing a new website. I've been working on that, and it's taking a lot longer than planned because step back and then I'm like, well, what do I want to do? Like then it's like, I don't have to do anything. I just be, right? But then
Right.
how do you like then the question is, how do you just be and still have
Right.
it?
Well, because it's a whole new level of being. So it's Laurel says comfortable with self. It's a whole new. It's literally the whole self,
Right.
not just the individual self.
Right.
Oh,
And when we finally get there, yeah, well, when we finally allow ourselves to be that, then we don't care. Oh yeah, because this connects into that, because then this connects into that acceptance of being able to say, every moment is in my wholeness. Therefore, if something is here or not, I'm totally not connected to it, which then totally really sort of disconnects, in a way, it disconnects us from that human experience, the human kind of experience that we're talking about, right?
right, right.
I mean, it's sort of like how many of us, you and I always have these parallel things going on, right? We don't necessarily talk, so like we cannot talk for a couple of days and then connect and then be like, oh my God, I've been having this. And it's like, oh, me too. It's
Yep.
like every single time.
Yeah.
I know that you are. And I know that others are that, that we're all in that same place. So we don't have to connect in a different way, except we're still in the habit of connecting that
Right. Oh,
way. So,
named it. Yes, we got it. She's back on the ground.
so it is, and it is recreating our being present here.
Right. Our wholeness presentation or our wholeness presence.
And that's truly being free of dependence on connection
Oh,
in any,
that feels great.
right?
It feels pretty massive though.
It does, yeah, like bigger than a brain box for sure.
Well, bigger than this meat suit, you know?
Much bigger. Well, this is truly a collective thing.
Yeah, I can feel this going.
Right, yeah, exactly. I feel it here. I feel this going, you know, all in the throat and the heart.
Oh wow.
And then that travels up into the head. Yeah, that's incredible. Oh, so, oh, excuse me, there the yawns.
Yeah.
So it's a completely different, yeah.
Yeah,
Again, words.
and the aloneness follows with this because we're having to learn to be in a place and reestablish connectivity, if you will,
In a
or
completely different way.
remember it.
Yeah.
Right.
Remember true connectivity versus falsely represented connectivity and separation.
Exactly.
Oh, look.
Exactly.
Oh, well, you know what that's representative of is the internet stuff, right? How everybody is so like attached to their phones and so attached to their
Right.
computers and
Right.
constantly texting and looking at this and looking at that or whatever. And people say, but we're more connected than ever before. And I'm like, right, but we're less connected than ever before too.
Exactly.
Oh yeah,
It
this is
was, it was almost like that was practice for this.
mhm. Because now it's like, okay, now that you've seen that, now it's time to see this, which is so much even bigger, right?
Right.
Because the truth is, when we stop, and when we stop, because God, I can't even keep up with words that I'm seeing now, right? It's like, yeah, it's like because when we see that part of it, right, the disconnection from the connection. The thing is, because we depend on community connection, connecting with others and whatever, like to feel like we're whole and valued and whatever, right? that's still a dependence and it's still a lack and separation thing, right? So when we
Right.
really get to that wholeness is to really go inside completely, right? It is a completely new level. And it's just, I don't have the, we're like saying it and it's just like the words aren't even really relaying it.
No, not
It,
at all.
it's coming to a completely different state of being so that we actually disconnect completely from the old ways of connecting and create a whole completely new way of being connected, which is a completely different thing.
Right. Yes.
Oh yeah,
That
that feels
that
really good.
that you just said.
I probably couldn't say it again.
I know. Yeah.
Loving those
And
words
when
come
I'm
out. And then
saying,
people say, "What'd you say?" I'm like, I don't know.
yeah. And while you were talking, I could see how, we always think about expansion being outwards. This one almost feels like expanding inward and then outward via inward, if that makes
Well,
any
because
sense.
yeah, it does. Because what I've been seeing, it's funny because I'm like trying to remember. There was something in meditation this morning, and it was a facet of myself. So this is the second time in the past week I've seen this. There's a remember the feather dragon that I remembered from Lemuria that I created. It was like my first creation kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, I haven't seen her or it in ages, and it just sort of she started popping in this week, right? And I see the face, and there's like the instant recognition, and there's this struggle of the mind that says, "Oh, what is the name? Like I can't remember the name. The name is like escaping me, but I feel the familiarity." And the response is, "Why do you need a name?"
Right.
Because I'm a part of you. All of creation is within you. It's not outside of you. So when we have to name something, we have to we have to create it like we sort of externalize it, right? Yeah, Laurel
Yeah.
says
Yes, I'm expanding inward. Yeah.
yeah, and so but anyway, so like she was there to say, and it was funny because she wrapped her wings around me and said, I don't need to exist anymore because I'm already within you, right? So it's almost like that whole like there's no reason for there was more that I can't quite remember and I forgot to even journal it like
Almost like
notebook.
there was no need for that external visualization because it was all internal.
Right, because it was almost like the face was fading in and out, the physicality of it was fading in and out, and she wrapped her wings around me, and then she just sort of started to fade in, and then it's like it was to sort of show me that everything is that, which is
Right.
totally
Oh,
aligned with this.
yeah. So I guess it's a returning to the internalization of everything that we are.
And it's funny because it's so funny because when we say internalization, like we always think of it as being confining, right? Internalization is bringing it in, but it's actually an expansive internalization. It's like this
Yeah.
it's actually finding the universe in its entirety within us
With exactly.
so that
Exactly.
we don't have to reach out for anything because it's already inside of us. So you're inside of me, I'm inside of you, like that whole like and it's all like everything. So there's nothing to reach out for, so there's no need to connect in the way that we're in the habit of connecting as human, right? But now
Right.
as a way of creating, it goes back to this is a whole different level of doing from being, right? Which seems to be our theme the past couple months, right?
Right.
And it's oh, and this is why what I'm hearing, what I'm understanding, not hearing, but just understanding is why when I was talking Friday about how it seems to be suddenly creation is like instantaneous for me for the last several weeks. It's just been
Right.
like I say it and it happens. I say change
Right.
it and it changes. And there's
Right.
literally no lag, no processing, no like process of creation, it just happens. It's there.
Right.
And I can feel that more and more. So every time I go to meditation with any kind of creation, it's like you can just feel it inside of you and it's already there.
Right. That
So
makes perfect sense.
yeah, and it feels so much more so easy because it's effortless.
Yeah.
And it's still beliefs that say, oh, but this still has to be done this way. This still has to be done this way. I still have to connect this way because these are these parts of thinking, oh, well, that person's not there yet. But it's like, but that person's inside of you. So it's part
Right.
of for me, right? So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it really, really does simplify that instant manifestation and that instant, yeah, because the knowing is there too. Knowing that it's going to happen, knowing that you've created that. Oh, that feels great.
Yeah. Yeah. And like infinitely expansive. Like just even talking about it, I can just feel this.
Oh,
Like,
I
wow,
know.
it's so much bigger.
My entire insides are tingling.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I
So
think
really,
we can do that.
yeah, I think maybe today's thing is to remember how to be in that wholeness in that way and to do and connect in every, remember how to connect in this way in entirety without having to pull ourselves back into the habit.
Right, right. Yep.
Oh, yeah, it's already going. So let's go and do that.
Yeah, let's do.
I don't know how long we were out there. It felt like it was a long time. I suddenly had this consciousness of, wait, are we?
Charlie kept getting up and shaking and moving around, and
I heard Charlie, yeah. I
yeah,
just, at the end, I was just like, it just started to, it was like that outward kaleidoscope thing, but it was inward and it got bigger and bigger inward. And I was like, wow, this is, wow. I was like, felt so nice. And I kept on seeing things and I saw them connected in such a different way. It was really nice. Hmm. Did you did you get anything? I'm just still sort of out there.
it was just for me. I felt like it was taking ownership of everything that we've done and everything that we are, and almost like making peace with it and saying, "Yep, I did that. Yep, that's who I am. Yep, and guess what? I'm not apologizing for it anymore. I'm not coming up with explanations for why it is. That's who we are, who I am, and guess what? I'm everything, and I'm going to behave like that now." So it was
And
almost like it was like making peace so that you could re, allow it to reassimilate back in, and it would just it felt so tremendous of what that did.
what I saw in the beginning and what I understood was this is how you remember that you are God. Or whatever you want to call it, source
Right.
or whatever. But essentially, that's what it is.
I don't
Because
know if I don't know if you remember. There's a picture which I had looked at a while back, and it's something that the Hubble telescope took a picture of. And everybody's putting it out there. Is this heaven? I don't know what it is, and
oh yeah, the
it.
Photoshop thing. Yeah, yep, yep.
I saw that, and it was like, yep, that's me. Yep, that's inside me. And I felt like I could visualize myself somewhere, even if it's like in a nebula or whatever, and I was instantly right there.
Yes, actually, it was funny that you say that. I remember when we were out there, I remember something about like seeing like the whole multiverse as me, right? And
Yep,
then it was like I was just popping for a while into different parts of it. And then I was seeing, like, I don't know if you saw recently, they've decided they think that black holes actually don't destroy matter, but they just transport them into different parts of the multiverse, right?
right, right.
Transport matter. And it was like, of course, that's what like all the spaces in between all of this, like, it was just like all this stuff. And I'm like watching that, and it was like, well, then where do you go? Everywhere and nowhere. It's all the same. There's no difference. It was like watching this whole thing in space and within me. It was like really cool. It was really
Yeah, yep,
cool. And it's like, well, and of course, as truly divine consciousness, right? Whether it's God or however you want to look at it, right? Divine consciousness, all of the consciousness of the multiverse.
yeah,
There is nothing to judge because judgment's not even created except within you, right? As part of
exactly.
the creation, right?
Right.
It was such nice, and it was such a very subtle shift, but it was so tremendous in terms of energy.
Oh, it really was very empowering from a holistic perspective.
And easy.
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
Empowering and easy, like a big breath of, oh, good, right.
yeah. And I keep I'm always hung up on the second nature. It's not second nature. It's who you are. And I
I
feel
like
like
that.
we've actually touched on who we really are.
Yeah, that was just, it was incredible.
Yeah.
Well, fabulosity as always.
Right. Right.
Oh, thank everybody who joined us. I'm still yawning.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And yet it's so
Oh, right.
invigorating at the same time. So everybody have a fabulous week. Thank you for joining us. And we should be back to normal time next week.
Yep.
Yep. So
Absolutely.
next Monday morning. So thank you. Have a great one. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avignon.
signing off on this extended world collective energy share. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.